Well, good morning, everybody. Somewhere at the top of every mountain around the world, you might find a New Zealander. And when I say New Zealander or mountain, I mean at the top of their career, the position they might have in the world. And just by way of example, you may have heard of Sir Edmund Hillary, a New Zealander who conquered Mount Everest. You may have heard of the All Blacks. They play rugby every now and again. Sir Peter Blake, who took the America's Cup away from you once, and Kiri Te Kanawa, an opera singer, etc. And so in many parts of the world you find New Zealanders that aren't in New Zealand. They're around the world climbing their own Everest, they're creating their own opera, etc. And so I don't know whether it's because we're an island nation in the bottom of the South Pacific, whether we are just adventurers at heart or like to travel. I think we're all of those things. I've conquered my Everest finally, and it took me a long time to get there. And so I thought I'd start today just by sort of talking about the words Master Sommelier. And first of all, the word sommelier. Where does it come from? It's actually Italian in origin, and pronunciation-wise it's Latin-based. It's almost like sommelier, and the French borrowed it, stole it, whatever you like. It's a French profession. It really does mean wine server as a raw concept. And it's grown in terms of profession in the hospitality industry since the early 20th century. Pronunciation of the word sommelier, and this is where you get involved right from the outset. First of all, what not to say, Somalia. All right, now that's a small nation somewhere in Africa, and you be sure you don't ask for the sommelier in a restaurant, okay? The second word not to say, or the second way not to pronounce it, is smellier, because a master sommelier is the smelliest one of all, but you don't say smellier. The way to say it is sommelier, and if you can say the word so, and you can say the word yeah, and you hold the L, so you go sommelier. Okay, can you do that? Sommelier. Okay. In New Zealand we might say sommelier, and that's fine, but I like to say it the American way, sommelier. And just hold the L a little bit is all you need to do. Now the word master, where does that come from? Well, it's somebody who's achieved a pinnacle, the top end of their profession, and how do they earn that title? Well, here's an example of what a master should be able to do. A customer walks into a restaurant and says, "I'd like something to drink. I don't like wine. I don't want to drink champagne. I don't want a spirit. I don't want a beer, and I don't want a cocktail. What can you sell me?" So if you think about that for a second, what on earth would that customer have? So a master, or somebody with the right credentials, if you like, would then turn around and say, well, I can offer you an aperitif from France, Pinot de Charente, which is a fortified wine that's flavoured with herbs and spices. Or you might suggest a Cinzano from Italy. Or you might suggest a Pimm's from the UK. Or you might suggest a local beverage from the area in which you work. So there are answers to those questions. The challenge, of course, is being the person who can provide that instantaneous answer. A second scenario, the customer orders fish and fries. And excuse my accent, it's fish, not fish. It's fish and fries, or as we say in New Zealand, chips, fish and chips. And the customer says, well, I don't want white wine, and I don't want red wine, and I don't like beer. What can they have with that particular dish? And the answer is sherry, dry sherry from Spain, because a lot of people like to put lemon juice on their fish, salt, or vinegar, and sherry goes with all of those condiments on the fish. So that's, having somebody come up with those answers. But a master sommelier must also be somebody who can identify and source quality wine, get the right purchase price, understand the storage capacities, if you like, or the storage or the cellarability of a wine, somebody who has the ability to train other staff, somebody who has the ability for continued daily wine and food pairing, the specials of the day, what's that going to go with, somebody who is creative behind the bar, and so on and so on and so on. So it's every aspect of front of house operations, including serving a table as a waiter from time to time, that's all encompassed in the role. But at the end of the day, the overriding word is hospitality, and it's the relationship between the customers, and the person serving them. So as Jesse indicated before, it's a little unusual for me to address you, unless you're all sitting down about to have dinner. That would be a little bit different. So, I think sourcing and buying wine is a challenge. Learning to become a taster, a wine taster, and I might sort of talk about that for a little moment, and give you a little bit of history into where I started in this industry. And I won't bore you with, you know, my mum did this and my father did that kind of thing, but it does help to give you the little bit of a background anyway. And what I forgot to say was that the Master Sommelier helps create the ultimate dining experience. And if I was serving you a $5 glass of wine, I would want to give you a $100 service by doing so. If I was serving you a $100 glass of wine, I'd want to give you $200 worth of service attached to that, because I don't want you walking out of my dining room dissatisfied with the product that I gave you. And I would rather let you take a mouthful of 20 different wines to help you find that right combination, or ask you 100 questions to get the right idea of what you're looking for in a wine, than send you away dissatisfied. And that makes me happy too. So, yes, New Zealand born and raised, and one of the common questions that I'd perhaps like to address as well is that we do have other masters in this world called Masters of Wine, and I'm a Master Sommelier. What is the difference? What is the connection? So a Master of Wine is somebody who are the commentators on the industry. They write the textbooks. They taste a lot of wine, and a lot of fortified wine, and the Jancis Robinsons of this world, the Robert Parkers of this world, they are masters of wine in a very particular context, and they're very famous for that, and they're very good at that, and they spend a lot of years getting their skills recognised as well. The sommelier, and not even a master, a sommelier is somebody who connects the context or the text of writing, the encyclopedias on wine, the Master of Wine, and what they have to say, they connect it with the food of a dining room, albeit a cafe or a fine dining restaurant, with the customer, the atmosphere, the target audience, etc. So we bring a lot of knowledge, put it in simple terms, and connect it to the customer and the food, and create dining experiences. And you don't have to be a master to do that. Okay, so where did I start my life? I left school really early. I was only 16 when I left school, and I got a job in a bank. And I survived that for about a year. And it was a very safe job to have. And I think in the second year that I was working for that bank, I started working for a hotel as well, part-time. And my eyes were opened up wide to this whole different world called hospitality. I had fun. I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I had fun. My social life exploded. I found out what nightclubs were all about, etc. And so I decided very quickly that I would leave the safety of a bank job and go with adventure in hospitality. And a lot of people say that hospitality ruins your social life. It just creates a different social life. And that opened my eyes enough to start a little bit more adventure. So I decided that at the age of 17, I'd like to start cooking. The big challenge I had at that point in time was I wasn't a trained chef. and I was a vegetarian. And I didn't really become something other than a vegetarian until I met my wife. So cooking meat, chicken, rabbit, etc. For people and not actually having ever ate it myself was a huge challenge, but I got by. One of the very first cooking jobs I had was in a New York style cafe in Auckland, New Zealand called a Reuben's Cafe, and we did Reuben sandwiches, etc. And I made nachos. And one of the highlights for me, other than being able to cook in that kitchen and see smiles on people's faces, was being the first cafe in the country to open 24 hours. And that was a great achievement for us. The first night we opened 24 hours, we had no customers. The second week, we were full from that point, and we never looked back. Anyhow, so I found that I loved to cook. And so I decided that a little bit of travel might help me and a little bit more experience in different restaurants. So I won a position in a restaurant that was more fine dining, and I started to learn about food and wine at that point. So I was all of about 18 years old. And hospitality in New Zealand is probably a little bit like hospitality here in the USA, where you can often just walk off the street and get a job. It doesn't always happen, but it certainly happens in the New Zealand hospitality industry. Sadly, redundancy comes along from time to time, and I was made redundant, and I thought, well, front of house is something that I could do very, very well. Actually, it reminds me of a story. Working for that first hotel, the Hyatt Hotel, as a junior waiter in the banquet department. It was the very first function on the very first day that I was working. It was a wedding for 500 people, and as you can imagine, they were dressed up to the nines, etc. But the gap between the tables was all of about 10 inches. And so carrying a tray of drinks was difficult to do it this way and walk sideways between the tables and then deliver. It was very difficult, especially with someone like me who had no training at all. Anyhow, after about an hour into the service, I thought, oh no, this is easy, I can do this. So the tray came up here, and I could negotiate between the tables quite well, and I had about 5 pints of beer on this tray, freshly poured, very cold, and so on and so on. Anyway, somebody at a table behind me that I didn't see was talking and gesticulating, and they knocked my elbow. And of course the tray of drinks went off me and to the person directly below them, which happened to be a lovely lady wearing a white dress. Okay, we'll leave it at that. Anyhow, needless to say, she screamed very, very loudly, and the room of 500 people went dead silent. What did I do? I dropped to my knees and I crawled out because I had no idea what to do. None whatsoever. Anyhow, but teamwork. The staff came along, they picked her up, they took her out, they cleaned her up, reset the table, and we carried on as though nothing had happened. That was... Oh. But I realised, gosh, I need some skills. And I learned my skills on the job, whereas you can train for these kind of skills now. Anyhow, so moving back to front of house, I found myself very, very comfortable looking after people. And hospitality, I might say, is something that you can't learn. You can teach people how to open a bottle of wine, serve a plate of food, but you can't teach them hospitality. It's something that has to come from within. You have to like people first and foremost, and you have to want to be able to make them happy. And it's called customer service, and we've all had good and bad customer service. Anyhow, I found myself in a position in a restaurant called Papillon. It was a fine dining restaurant, and I was fascinated by the owner. He worked every day. He would drive around the country in his own spare time, and he would go around tasting wines and buy those wines, bring them back to the restaurant. And he'd have a story for every single wine on that wine list, how he found it, what it tasted like, the food that it would go with, and how he just created these wonderful dining experiences simply by telling the people how he lived his life. So I hooked into this train of thought, and I started tasting wines with this person, and he was actually an inspiration for me. And so I decided that this is something I would like to get into. So I was 19 years old and found that I loved to to serve and talk about wine. An aspect of the role of a sommelier that I'll interject here is it's not just about wine. It's any beverage you can think of from anywhere in the world. And so now you can buy a book on mineral waters and how they might match with food. You know, that's part of the role that I should absorb. Once upon a time in the USA and around the world, and still in parts of the world now, cigar service. We have to know cigars because who knows when that might come back in fashion again. Long time coming in the USA, I know, but I've got a spare Cuban cigar out the back, by the way, if anybody's interested, but hey. Anyhow, so as one thing led to another, after a couple of years, I thought, now I can move on, and I found myself in a position, or won a position at the Sheraton Hotel in Auckland. It was one of only 2 properties in the country, and I got the job as the resident sommelier. And I really didn't know what that meant at that time. What was a sommelier? And to me it was just somebody who did the beverage service. Customer ordered a gin and tonic, I went and made it and delivered it to them. But nowadays I'd ask them what kind of gin they liked and how much ice they would like, how much tonic, whether it's on the side, etc., and give them the choice of 10 different gins to make that drink. And the glass that you serve it in makes a huge difference. A little tumbler is not as good as a Riedel O range, a stemless gin and tonic's fantastic in that glass. Anyhow, so I spent 5 years working for the Sheraton in their fine dining restaurant, and I was opened up to this wonderful world of wine, where wine companies would phone me up and say, we want to present you our range of wines. So they'd come in and I'd taste these wines. After about the first year, I realized that I didn't really have the palate, the tasting palate, to really identify the quality wines, because they all tasted great to me. And they were all good. So I embarked on a wine training program of my own. I decided that it would be a good idea to really start getting some credentials for this. And so I did. I hooked into a wine program ran by a master of wine and learned the technique of tasting wine. And if I wanted you to leave here today with something, is some ideas about tasting wine on your own or next time you dine out. And remind me to do that, okay? So I embarked on that. Luckily the hotel helped pay for it, and I started to build a little certificate program in wine tasting of my own. It helped me immensely because it then exposed me to understanding more quality aspects of wine and why they tasted the way they did. And then of course it helped me in my job, especially in a 5-star hotel, that I could then start to interact with the customer and the wine, etc. And opening, tasting, technique's a different thing when it comes to, you know, red wine service in a 5-star hotel is a lot different from red wine service in your local licensed cafe. You know, the differences are obvious. So, whilst I was now working this new role at the Sheraton Hotel, suddenly I received a phone call from a friend and said, look, we've got this teaching position going at a Polytechnic. Would you be prepared to come along and take a look at it? Because one of my other interests at the time was computers, which I'm sure one or two of you know something about, but it was computers at that time and I was absolutely fascinated by it. Anyhow, I failed the entry exam into learning computer programming. So I got a wee teaching job teaching desktop publishing programs, or just application software, at a Polytech. A friend of mine was a lecturer in wine at that same Polytech, and he was on a Master of Wine program. And he said, I've got to go away and do these exams, can you run my classes for me? And one thing I didn't tell you about my parents, my mother especially, she was a teacher, and my grandfather was a teacher, etc. And I fell into this teaching role that I also loved. So then I was challenged by, what am I going to do? I love teaching. I love serving wine and beverages. Why don't I'll just do both? So I taught during the day, worked during the night, and I was quite happy with it. And my soon-to-be wife at the time was quite happy about that as well. It was career building, and it worked quite well. So then I had to prove myself in education, and eventually it took me 8 years, also working in hospitality, chipping away, and I got a degree in education as well. So I can add those words to my credentials now. Working for the Sheraton Hotel came to an end after 5 years, and I landed a job as the sommelier in another restaurant, which I absolutely loved, and stayed there for 10 years and continued my teaching role. I left the Polytech and got a full-time teaching job at a university, to which I have still got that job today as a senior lecturer, but I run the beverage program there. And then, let me fast forward a few years. About 8 years into my role in this particular restaurant and doing a little bit of teaching, a very regular customer came into the restaurant and said, Cameron, actually said to my wife, why doesn't Cameron embark on the Master Sommelier Diploma? And together, those two people came to me, my wife and this regular customer, and said, why don't I do this? And I said, oh, it sounds like a good idea. And I got given the name of a gentleman called Evan Goldstein, who is a very famous person within the Court of Master Sommeliers here in San Francisco. And I started an email dialogue with him and eventually convinced the Court of Master Sommeliers to let me come to America and start on their program. The problem being, the convincing was that the program was so popular even back then that as soon as the dates were released, the positions would fill up, and I had no chance. So I convinced them, and I came to America and I did my level 1. It's a 4-level program, level 1 in Las Vegas at the Bellagio Hotel. And I mean, you walk into that place and your eyes are, wow. And I was one of 150 people. The dress standard is a suit, even at level 1. You walk in looking like a Master Sommelier for this program. It's a 3-day program culminating in an exam, and I sweated those 3 days, you wouldn't believe, because they're telling you what you need to know for this exam, and it was stuff, you know, I didn't know how to pronounce, let alone find the second wines of Bordeaux growths and things like that. I didn't know there was a textbook that I could use, etc. So, anyhow, I passed the exam. Whew. And it's a 90% pass rate at the level 1. It's not that difficult, but unless you actually have an interest and a passion to begin with, it can be very difficult. The one thing that happened to me was at that graduation, because there's a graduation ceremony at every level. I walked on stage, I received this tiny little silver pin that I could then wear as a badge of office, and another gentleman that is well known in the sommelier circles called Fred Dame, a Master Sommelier. He said, if you want to go further in this program, as he's shaking my hand, I will help you. That's all it took. I walked out of the room, I phoned my wife and said, I'm going to be a Master Sommelier. It was all I needed. And the one thing, another thing other than some wine tasting advice I'd like you to take away with you is one of the philosophies of the court is to pay it forward. It's not, oh, I've got this title now, kiss the ring kind of thing, all right? It's pay it forward. Anybody that's interested in wine or any beverage at all, you want to learn more, I'd be thrilled to help you out. You want to get into the program, let me know. I'll give you your first 100 questions to tackle on the theory. You want to learn to taste wine, let's set up a time and we'll just do one wine together. And so I would then have to spend the next 6 years on this program working through the levels. They're all international. I had to come to the United States to do it because the program didn't exist in the South Pacific at all. It does now. And so the next level was the certified. It didn't exist, but all of you can do that if you want to. It means that you can present, open and pour white wine, red wine, sparkling wine. You can taste 2 wines and identify them blind, and you can answer a bunch of questions about it. It's very possible for somebody, but you can walk out of the program at any stage and be proud of it, even at a level 1. The biggest challenge for me at the advanced level at that time, which is now level 3 in the program, is accessing wines, finding the funds to purchase those wines that weren't necessarily available in New Zealand at all, and then secondly, raising the money to get here to sit the exams. And when you've got an $800 a pop exam fee, it's a lot to add on to a flight, accommodation, food, etc. So professional development funds at the university helped me out a little bit, but you know, by and large I had to raise the money myself, along with my wife. Advanced exam San Francisco, so we'll fast forward again a couple of years, failed. There are 3 parts to that exam: a blind tasting, a service, and a written test. And I did not pass any of those parts at all. So I had to go all the way back home again and say, I'm sorry, it didn't work. 12 months later, I came back, I'd studied harder, I'd tasted more, I'd served more, and I nailed all 3 parts on my second go. So then I carried a different size badge, slightly bigger, you could actually see it, and a certificate, and I was an advanced level sommelier. And then, of course, 12 months later, at the master's level, it's invitation only. One of the big challenges between advanced and masters is continued access to wine, access to a mentor, access to a tasting group that can help you out. Being the only one in New Zealand, all of those things were impossible by and large. So I had to do my mentoring remotely on the internet. Thank you, Google, for that. And I had to find people who were willing to talk to me, and I had to make several trips to the USA just to get exposure to the tasting group and a master, etc. There's a lot of money involved in this final badge that I have. Attempt 1 at masters, 0. It's like going from junior high to college overnight. And the leap in what you need to know is incredible. Yes, you could say that a master is a walking encyclopedia, but it's not really about that information, it's about what I can offer you. And attempt 2, coming back to San Francisco again, I passed 1 part. At the master's level, once you pass a single exam, you're on the clock. You've got 2 more years to get the other 2 parts. And so I got the service under my belt. It was something that I'd been doing for over 20 years in the hospitality industry. And then attempt number 2, 0. Attempt number 3, I thought, well, I need to do this in a slightly different way. So I came to the US for 3 months, and I worked for Yellowstone Club in Montana with a colleague who was also taking the exams. 3 months down the track, attempt number 3, 0. So now I have 1 more attempt to pass these exams. What am I doing wrong? You know, the definition of stupidity, and not that I'm trying to say I was stupid, is that if you do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result, what is that the definition of? And so we had to, my wife and I had to stand back, wipe the slate clean and go, how am I going to pass these exams? What am I going to do differently in order to pass these exams? So we studied differently. She became my coach. We had to access wines from the US, French, you know, rarer French wines, especially American wines. There's all of 3 brands still in New Zealand from America. And so we had to find a way to get wine to New Zealand, tasting every day. 6 wines blind, and I'll show you some pictures shortly and sort of show you really how difficult that is and talk about those. Open questions from my wife and other people every day. You know, give me 3 wines from Cantonac, what growth are they, and do they have any second wines, and what's their AOC? Okay, so I amassed a bank of probably 20,000 questions that I could possibly be asked in the master's exam. And the one thing about master's exams to remember is they're all oral. The roll is in real time. And so you get asked a bunch of questions from a bunch of masters, and you have to answer that then and there. And the pass is 75% or better. You're given 6 wines blind, 3 white and 3 red, and you only have 25 minutes to identify those wines. And that's them saying nothing. It's like all you people standing there listening to me talk about 6 wines in 25 minutes, and then at the end of that say, wine number 1 is in fact a Chardonnay from Chablis, from Burgundy. It's a 2005 vintage Premier Cru level wine number 2. Next 4 minutes, bang, 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 bang. And so you have to get really 4 or more out of 6 correct, absolute, in order to pass the tasting test. And then of course there's a service exam. Decant this. open that champagne, tell me about wine and food pairing, problem customers, all sorts of things going blasted at you for about an hour. So it's a real-time testing situation, and each test is a 75% minimum pass. So it's quite a challenge, but not impossible. What did I do differently? I studied harder, I tasted more every day. I had people asking me questions. We were asking questions in the car on the way to work, as opposed to a car, which is an American thing, a car, on the way to work, and so on. No television, no movies, no spicy foods, no high-fat foods, because everything you do affects the way you taste. And so it's absolute focus on that final goal. I had the opportunity to go to London and sit this test one more time before I'd have to start again, essentially. And so I passed. I went to London. I felt differently. I felt confident in that I can do this. I haven't been in this industry for 26 years now not to achieve my Mount Everest. And I did my tasting exam, I ran downstairs, used the hotel toilets, I got changed, caught a train to Heathrow Airport and flew home. And that's a 24-hour journey, by the way, from London to New Zealand. And I got out of the airport, went straight to a wine show, a 3-day wine show, and 12 hours later I was home again, having judged wine all day, to a message on my answer phone saying, "Oh, Cameron, it's Brian Julian speaking, I have some feedback for you on your exam." Click. And unfortunately, you know, England was 12 hours behind, so it was 6 in the morning there and 7 at night for me, so I couldn't very well call him up at his house and say, "Give me my result." So we emailed him and said, "We'll call you at 9 p.m. And my wife was out of the house getting some takeout. We were just going crazy. And that why I'm bald was because it all fell out with stress. And she came home with the takeout, and the lights were out in the house, completely blacked out, and she couldn't find me. I was in the bedroom on the floor at the end of the bed going, yeah, He'd finally called, by the way, yeah, okay. And he'd already given me the result, but what he was doing was actually giving me the feedback at the time my wife walked in the room. So I was just going, yeah, I see. All right, okay, yeah. And so she had no idea. I knew. All that elation had sort of subsided enough for me to listen, and I handed the phone to her, and he said that I had passed. So it's a huge achievement in many ways, because it means that I can continue to promote the role of a profession or an aspect of hospitality that does have credentials and profession or a professional approach in New Zealand. It's not just about serving drinks, it's about making dining experiences fantastic for people. And it doesn't matter if it's a cafe or fine dining. If you want a $5 glass of wine, I'll give you a $100 service with that, and that's what it's all about. And it's not about delivering a glass that somebody ordered to a table, it's actually about pouring the wine from that bottle to that person at that table. That's service. So, let me show you a couple of pictures, and just that may talk about the journey. Well, this is a wine rack full of wine. But part of the role is the labour. I had to build the racks, I had to put the wine in it, sort it into order, and make sure that the stock was okay. That's at the Yellowstone Club, by the way, in Montana. All right. This is a picture of me in South San Francisco in Los Altos. It's probably about 6:30 in the morning, and you can see I have 3 white and 3 red wine, and that's my wife in the background in her pajamas, writing down everything I say and timing me for 25 minutes. And so it takes continued effort. You don't swallow anything at all. You spit these wines out, especially at 6 in the morning. Okay, so this is kind of interesting because this is about 7 or 8 glasses of red wine and a whole bunch of bottles. And essentially what I would do is I would taste 3 white and 3 red, and then a different set and then a different set again. And all the wines I got correct would then be put to one side, and all the wines I got incorrect would then be lined up in a different order. So I knew that these wines would be there but they were completely messed around, and I had to do the whole exercise again just with red wines. And you can see where the expense comes in if you're doing 2 or 3 flights of this and then returning to the wine. And then of course the wine starts to change over age and then eventually fall over. So you either have to drink it that night or give it away. So our neighbours love us because we just ended up giving it away. And this is back at my house in New Zealand, and one of the things that I had to do in terms of study is create my own study Bible. Take all the textbooks that I was using, write the key information into my own Cameron Douglas How to Be a Master Sommelier. All right, and that red folder is it. Thank you. What else does a sommelier do? They need to travel. They need to learn about the wines firsthand, in real time. This is a shot of a piece of soil from central Otago in New Zealand at a very famous winery called Felton Road about 3 weeks ago. And luckily at the time I was there, a university team dug about 12 feet down to get a profile of the soil. And what's really interesting, especially for us, is that you can see that there are vine roots right in the soil 12 feet down, and the white streaks through there is the limestone that we have down there, and the rest is pretty much sand. It would crumble away. And so there's a lot of sand down there, a lot of limestone. The roots need to go down because when it rains, the water just drops down, etc. So that helps me talk about to customers about wine from that area, what the soil is like and why you would expect that kind of aspect of the wine to come through in a continental climate, etc. Okay, next slide. All right, the day I got back from the USA without knowing my results was part of the Air New Zealand Wine Awards, and this isn't the scene that I would walk into, this is the scene of the backroom helpers. So this is close to 2,000 wines to be tasted over 3 days. Thank you. Back to Central Otago. If you ever get there, this is Peregrine Winery, but thank you. This is after I had found out my result and my little nephew, and he helped build a volcano, and if you pour sparkling wine into a particular mixture, it bubbles up. Thank you. And he was fascinated. Now, what I didn't know, but I do know now, and that you might see later on, is that I was the highest scoring candidate in London in November, and there was a particular trophy attached to that called the Laurent Perrier Champagne Grand Siècle Trophy for the highest scoring candidate. In the USA, they have what's called the Champagne Krug Cup. It's a different scenario, but I didn't get it because I wasn't there to receive it. So my sister and brother-in-law had a cup made for me, put my name on it, and gave me a bottle of champagne. So that was absolutely thrilling, and I haven't opened the wine yet. Thanks, Marcus. Back to San Francisco, we can do another one. You can see the kind of wines that you have to taste: Spanish Rioja, Bordeaux growth wines, basic Californian Cabernet Sauvignon, which is absolutely readily available to you. You can't buy it in New Zealand. The only Californian Cabernet in New Zealand currently is Ravenswood. All right. So they do okay Zinfandel from time to time. All right. Thank you. Oh, did you see the T-shirt? Romulan Ale? Okay. Okay. So there's a lot of comparative tasting involved, just to work out what wine is what. Thanks, Marcus. Keep going. All right. This is what it was like from my side. And so there would be a team of people. We would have 40 to 50 wines at a time just to judge them. We didn't have to identify them. We knew that we had, say, 50 Sauvignon Blancs to try and decide which were the best wines. And we did that solidly, about 8 hours a day for 3 days. And we'd work through the grape varieties. You don't swallow anything except water. Otherwise, you know, after about 3 wines, it's all over. They're all great. Okay. Okay. Back to Montana, my first time in the snow. All right. Keep going. All right, this is interesting for you to do, is that instead of pouring yourself a full glass of wine, choose a nice big glass and pour maybe 2 ounces in there and lay it on its side. And one of the things that we do in the exam is we have to describe the wine as we see it before we describe it as we can smell it and then taste it. And in order to describe or discern a grape variety, the age of the wine, etc., is done through the visual in the first part. And you can see that that's pretty opaque wine. And towards the edge, around the outer rim, it's quite bright purple, or fuchsia pink, as we might say. Any wine that's very opaque and dark ruby that's got a pink rim could be 3 or 4 different grape varieties only. So I can break down into what I might be dealing with just through a visual without even smelling the wine. That could have been Argentinian Malbec, it could have been Californian Cabernet, it could have been a grossly extracted Pinot Noir from somewhere, or it could have been a Merlot. Thank you. Okay, keep going. Big Sky, Montana. Thank you. Big Sky, Montana. Rocks the dog on the left. Yes, please. Studying, study. I'm sure you know what that's all about, but it really is, it's about memory recall and information retrieval at the right time. Thank you. Okay, we'll make this the final slide. What does New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc taste like? Freshly cut grass. So this is a comparison, all right? I'd already gotten my result from that point. That's my backyard, by the way. Needs a bit of work, but hey. All right. So, tasting wine. Before, if you'd like to ask some questions, go ahead. Tasting wine. The next time you have a glass of champagne, and not sparkling wine made in America, I'm talking about the French stuff. The next time you have a glass of champagne, don't just take a mouthful and swallow it and go, ah, yes, that was the $100 I just spent. Okay? You smell that first, smell it hard, then smell it soft, and then smell it medium. Take a really large mouthful and just let it sit there. And then what you do is what I call the French kiss. You French kiss the wine. You roll your tongue around that champagne in your mouth and you let it foam up. And then you swallow it, okay? And your memory of that wine has changed tenfold because you've suddenly exposed your mind memory to the texture of champagne, how soft the mousse is, how small the bubble is, and then you don't take another sip for 2 minutes. How long does that flavour last? Is it worth the $100? Because if that flavour lasts more than a minute, you're probably in that right bracket. So quality wine is often associated with the length of flavour that you have after. If the flavour dies after about 5 or 10 seconds, you probably bought an inferior product in terms of its price quality ratio. But it's up to people like me to help set those price points in the industry. So a $20 bottle of sparkling wine should give $30 worth of value. You should always over-deliver on a product. The same with white wines and red wines. It's not about buying the same time everything that you like. It's about experimenting and buying something different. And that's part of the role of the sommelier as well, is to introduce you to those different experiences. Okay. All right, so does anybody have a question? It can be about any beverage in the world. Okay, I think there's a microphone there that... So
first I want to just ask, has anybody sent a bottle back?
To me?
Yeah.
Absolutely. We don't get it right all the time. And one of the biggest challenges for the wine industry, not a sommelier, is to stop faulty wines coming to their customers. And cork taint in wine is a huge problem. It's a huge issue, and it's largely being resolved with screw tops. And what's the rule? Your ultimate aim as a sommelier is to please the customer. I can always get that wine replaced by the supplier. I'd rather sell you something different or open another bottle. The problem being is if it's a $1,500 bottle of wine and they send it back, the customer's always right. You suddenly advertise that wine by the glass and try and recover your cost. and that's the only way you can deal with it.
If I were a wine connoisseur and I really like the Sauterne wines, but I was wondering, what's the difference between a really premium one like a Chateau d'Yquem? If somebody said to you, what food would I eat with one of those to really bring out the characteristics and enjoy it?
Okay, good question. Sweet wines are always or invariably taken at the end of a meal with a sweet food, right? A dessert. But a wine like Chateau d'Yquem or wines of that particular ilk or style are actually very, very good at the beginning of a meal as well as the end. And you can do something, I mean, the classic match with a Yquem is foie gras and goose liver pate, etc. But we've matched wines with, so long as you understand the sweetness level, the acidity level of a wine and pair that first and foremost. Wine and food pairing is about identifying the spikes in the food and the spikes in the wine. So if you've got a high acid wine like Chateau d'Yquem, it's also a high sugar wine, and then all the flavour components come underneath that, plus that botrytis, fungal character that it has. What can you do at the beginning of a meal? You match the acidity and you match the sweetness. So something as simple as poached pears with cheese as an appetizer dish works really, really well, because you're using the acidity in the wine to take care of the acidity in the cheese. You're matching the sweetness of the pear with the sweetness in the wine, and so on. And so you're just identifying flavour spikes in order to take care of it. Chateau d'Yquem's wonderful wine, incredibly expensive, hard to come by at the best of times, and really difficult on a wine list to really pull that wallet out and pay for it. So there are great alternatives that I've seen, especially in the US, funnily enough. Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Okay.
So you said that a sommelier's job is not necessarily to do with wine, it's to do with any beverage or alcohol. But I noticed that throughout your exams, the emphasis was always on wine, and that's where most of the training is. Does that mean that a sommelier still is more wine focused? Yes, they know about other stuff, but wine is their main expertise. Are there similar professions for like other alcohols? Because I mean, you could argue that single malt whiskey can get as complex as wine or cognacs or something like that. So are there similar professions for other?
Well, there is a brewmaster's qualification for beer, and yes, it is a wine focus, but when you think about a dining experience, it might start with a spirit, it might start with a beer, it might start with wine or champagne or a cocktails. That's why we need to know it all. And I think it's world competitions for things like cocktails, etc. We do, in practical exams, may have to identify spirits without tasting them, or fortified wines without tasting them, or explain the part of a beer brewing process, or explain different types of sake and what we might recommend. So we are exposed to that in a testing situation, but you're right, the 90% of the role is really based on wine.
It sounds like at the starting levels in your profession, you're probably mostly working at local restaurants, and then as you become more experienced, you're working at higher quality establishments. At the master level, where do you find yourself spending your time? Only at the finest of restaurants, serving royalty and captains of industry, and judging the quality of the nation of the wines of entire nations, or what else are you involved in?
I'll answer that in two parts. First of all, I passed in November. This is a year of firsts. So if you ask me the same question in 12 months from now, I might have a more complete answer for you. So the second part of the question is, since then, however, I mean, the Accor group of hotels, which are the Novotels, the Sofotels, the Grand Mercures and things like that, have 17 properties in New Zealand. I've just been invited to help them select their cellar wines. And so certainly being flown to a different part of the country, hosted overnight, taking them through a tasting and helping them identify their cellar wine potentials is part of the role, and that's a nice little reward that I have for it. Are there any roles for a Master Sommelier in New Zealand? Not yet. But it's something that I'm working on, because my wife and I run a consultancy. We are in charge of some wine lists for a number of restaurants. We certainly have a link to hotels now. I write a wine column for a magazine, plus I run a beverage program, and so that's plenty for the moment, but obviously as things progress over time, I might have a more definitive answer for you. In the USA, you might be running the beverage purchasing for a chain of hotels. You might be the training educator for Beam Wine Estates or Pernod Ricard or larger companies or a large winery.
I'm wondering if you have a recommendation for a resource for beginners who might want to, like myself, pair wine with my wife's excellent food as we entertain. A book, a class?
2 books to get hold of. The first one is called Perfect Pairings by Evan Goldstein, who's a Master Sommelier. It is a must because it's not like a cookbook as such, although it does have recipes in it. It's an education piece that you can just look up a wine or a particular food or an idea, and you're only reading 1 page. There's a few pictures in there, so Perfect Pairings by Evan Goldstein.
It's being Googled many times over right now.
Yeah, Perfect Pairings. And there's a new edition of his book coming out sometime in the next couple of years. I know he's working on it now. Absolutely brilliant text. The other one is written by the CEO of the Court of Master Sommeliers, and that's called Sales and Service for the Wine Professional. And that is a textbook that is a Bible really for somebody who's looking to gain credentials in sommelier services. And there is a 3rd edition coming out on the 25th of April. Amazon.com it and put your name down. It's probably about $50. That's a good reference piece.
I have a question. With all the wine tasting experience you've had, I mean, everyone can probably go to a store and pick out things like a Chateau d'Yquem or a Bordeaux First Growth. But in your experience, is there some wines that we wouldn't know about, which you think would give us what would be like some of your more adventurous recommendations?
That's really quite a difficult question to answer because my exposure to the range of wines that are available in the US is this much. And it's only an experience that I've gained little bits of with each trip that I come here. But really, let me tell you about a fabulous dinner I had last night, all right? And it was at home with our great friend Georgia McRae. We had crab with Champagne Clicquot, Veuve Clicquot champagne, crab, and sour cream with lots of lemon juice in it. It was a perfect pairing because the weight and intensity of the food was perfectly paired with the weight and intensity of the wine. Neither was too complex to overpower my senses, and so I would recommend you try Veuve Clicquot with crab any day of the week, and that's a fun pairing to have. Another fun pairing while I'm thinking of it is, you know how there's dry sherry, medium sherry, and sweet sherry? Drinking those by themselves isn't that interesting, especially the sweet sherries, because they're so much like a dessert wine. What do you do with it? Dessert sherry is often very dark brown or black in colour. The best match I've ever had with that, which I didn't create, I just absolutely love it, is balsamic vinegar ice cream and baked tomato tart. So really thin cut pastry, tomatoes almost semi-dried, a little bit of Turkish kishmish, which is like dates and prunes really finely chopped on top, balsamic vinegar ice cream. That alone is a fantastic combination. And a fine dessert sherry on top with balsamic vinegar. It's beautiful. Yeah. Hello.
I'd like to develop a small collection of wine tasting glasses. What kind of characteristics would I look at, and what are the most important things in comparing them?
The most important thing is that you really only have 2 brands, and I'm not promoting a particular brand here, but really the Riedel range, they have a tasting range that you can purchase, and Spiegelau have a tasting range that you can purchase. The glass must be as thin as possible, no etching or markings on it, and be quite a large bowl. If you saw the ones in the picture, that it's got a wide enough bowl. Never put them in the dishwasher, ever. Only ever wash them with a little bit of detergent, tiny, tiny bit. So really all you're doing is removing the grease and the finger marks. Polish them by hand and keep them absolutely clean and lots of air flowing through them. And so as thin as possible, really. Yeah.
Why is it that when you guys pour champagne, it doesn't go bubbling out of the glass, and then when we do it at home, even slowly, it goes
Okay.
out of the glass?
Sparkling wine reacts to impurities inside the glass. It could be dust on the inside. It could be a notch in the glass from the blowing or the punching process, if you like, of ready-made glassware. And it will bubble more if there's impurities or dust in the glass. So the more you polish a champagne flute, the less it should bubble up. Also, if the wine is too warm, it will bubble up even more. A champagne bottle has 6 atmospheres of pressure in there at about 9 or 10 degrees Celsius. And the way to reduce that pressure for pouring is to chill it down. So wine, champagne stored in a refrigerator about 5 or 6 degrees is a lot easier to open than one that's warmer. And 6 atmospheres of pressure is about what you might get inside of a bus tire. And so you want to reduce that down by chilling it. So you've got to polish your glass and pour slowly as possible.
So all that polishing isn't just for show?
It's not just for show at all.
My second question is, do you have to take special care of your teeth with all the wines that
Yeah,
you
it
take?
becomes
I I would think, in a day of tasting 200 wines, even spitting them out, you
Yeah.
have to really be careful.
For a wine taster, you clean your teeth in the morning, then you eat breakfast, and then you expose yourself to the wines. And acid is a huge problem. It eats the enamel on your teeth quite considerably. And if you've tasted, like you say, 150 Sauvignon Blancs in one day, your teeth ache at the end of the day. There is a company in Japan that has produced a chewing gum that you can chew before and after wine tasting that protects the enamel on your teeth. But ultimately, there's degradation at the end of the day. And so you essentially get your dentist to help you out a lot. And make sure you get teeth insurance too.
Hi. I'll try not to ramble, but I just wanted to express sort of a skepticism and frustration that I have. When I go to restaurants, there's the inevitable wine list, and more often than not, when I look at this wine list, I think it's preposterous that anyone outside, a very, very select few, are going to have an acquaintance, a bare acquaintance with even 5% of what's on that wine list. I don't know, let's guess. Let's assume that there's 50 bottles, 60 bottles available. So, and furthermore, the way that those bottles are presented, it's just text. And it brings to mind your mention of the way that you had to go about studying for this exam. It's just a vast amount of regurgitation, of factual regurgitation. So, one, there's just the medium by which you're looking at these choices. Two, there's the amount of choice that you have. And just sort of, broadly reflecting on this, given that there's not going to be a sommelier at many good restaurants, have you thought about more innovative ways of presenting the wine selection to people at restaurants?
Well, it's something that in the program that I run at the university is a project for students to undertake, is that there are, the way a wine list is presented is ingrained in tradition. It's a list of either a grape variety and all the producers who make wine under that grape variety, and there's the price you pay. And that means something only to people who know what they're talking about and have some experience. But a lot of consumers have little to no experience in even some simple grape varieties. And so what we've come up with is that a wine list can be presented according to course. So appetizer wines, and it will list them. But it will also list them not only just by their name, but according to how light or heavy they are. So the further you go down the list under that particular category, the wine gets fuller, heavier, richer, and probably more expensive as well. So we can have appetizer, main course, sweet wines. You can present it according to region. You can present it according to its weight and in its intensity itself. And what the wine list should do is be the sommelier in the absence of a sommelier. So there should be some kind of introduction to that particular section of the wine list, what the philosophy is in terms of food and wine pairing and why those wines are selected in the first place. Because if you've got a wine list that doesn't talk to the food, what's the point in having it there? And I know there are probably 1,000 restaurants in the surrounding 10 miles that actually don't care whether or not the wine goes with the food. They've just got to have some wine on the wine list. And it doesn't talk to the food at all. And people come in, they chug-a-lug the wine, and they walk out the door, they're fed, they're watered, and off they go. But there are a number of people who want a little bit more out of that. I mean, my recommendation to you is to get people, anybody in that restaurant, to pour the wine at the table and to offer a taste of a number of different wines until you find one that you like. Because ultimately, you'll walk out going, hey, I got to try 10 different wines, it cost me nothing, and then I chose something I liked. I'll come back to that restaurant and do it again.
That wine pairings book is, I agree, it is excellent. I just found it, and it was like, that was a breath of fresh air for me. I'm like, oh, this is a great reference book. And there should be more of that, I think.
Yeah.
Hi. My wife and I taste a reasonable amount of wine, and as I'm tasting wine, I detect things that I like and I dislike, that I find interesting, and that I relate to other experiences. But I feel that I don't have a vocabulary to kind of communicate what I'm experiencing, and I'm curious, what are some ways that I might be able to, develop that vocabulary?
Really good question. The next time you walk into a vegetable store or a supermarket, and you know how a lot of people sort of squeeze the fruit and the vegetables before they pick the one that they want? I don't want you to squeeze them, I want you to pick up everything that you can and smell it. When you go into somebody else's home and you're helping them prepare a dinner, you smell every single spice in their pantry. You know how you open the drawer after the summer to pull out your sweaters for the winter? Smell your sweater. What everything smells like. If you've ever walked into your home or somebody else's home one day and gone, there's a cat or a mouse in this house, I can smell it, right? Or the cat's peed in the corner somewhere and you got to go and find it, right? You're exposing yourself to senses. When you walk outside today, you smell the grass on the ground, you smell the bark of the tree, and you expose yourself. So you've already got the vocabulary in your head. What you're trying to do is, rather than pluck it from the air, is actually use your experiences to help you describe the wine. So Fruit Loops. People use the word Fruit Loop to describe some wines as opposed to somebody who needs some attention, all right? It's said that some Italian wines have a cola smell. If you smell sand, granite, rocks, freshly poured concrete, some wines smell like the atmosphere just after it's rained. You walk outside and you've got this beautiful sweet air smell. You can smell that in some wines. Fish tank pebbles. Once you've cleaned out the fish tank, you've got wet pebbles, smell them. Crushed vitamins, crushed seashells. Crushed seashells is Chablis. Next time you buy a Chablis, don't let it get too cold. When it warms up, you smell crushed seashells. Some people taste chalk in Chablis. So it's okay to actually take a piece of chalk and eat a little bit. It's okay, it won't kill you. But do it. Cough medicine, cooked pastry, uncooked pastry, a rusty old barrel, the tire of a car, the tar on the road. These are all words that you can now start to use so long as you've gone ahead and smelled it. Yeah? And when I'm teaching people about wine, that's it. That's all I'm trying to do is give them the vocabulary to help them. Yeah? If you smell too much, smell your elbow. Nobody ever puts perfume or aftershave on their elbow, and if you've got a long sleeve, not your skin, smell your elbow, it'll neutralize. Yeah, you keep smelling.
Hi, you've actually caused me to remember another question I wanted to ask besides the two I already had. But first of all, what do you do with open bottles to keep them for another day or two? I've tried lots of different things, but I'm curious what your take is.
Well, a wine's going to change once it's open anyway. It's inevitable. It will age because of the dissolved oxygen in the wine that it already has. So it will have a life expectancy, but you can purchase argon gas and squirt some argon gas into the bottle, put the cork back in, and you'll be safe for a few days. And you can purchase vacuum pumps, so you replace the cork with a rubber cork, squeeze open the little nipple on the top and vacuum the oxygen out. That works okay. I use that most of the time. And drink it. Sorry. Yeah.
There are limits.
Yeah.
So my original question was, as you have learned to taste better, and you've met lots of people who have learned to taste well, does that sort of ruin you to the simpler, perhaps cheaper wines? Because as I try to do my own tasting, I sometimes worry, boy, I'm really a great taster now. I just want to buy $50 bottles of wine, which doesn't seem like a good thing.
Yeah, I think sadly yes, but I absolutely am not judging wine when I'm drinking in a social situation, and I keep my mouth shut. And providing the wine is not off, I will enjoy it just as much as the next person, because it's not just really about the wine, it's about the people that you're with, it's about the social occasion, it's about the food and the reason for the gathering in the first place, which brings me back to that dining experience thing. And yes, the wine's important, but it's the big picture that I'm concerned with. Yeah.
So what does your cellar mostly consist of?
Oh, really good question. A whole lot of wine left over from preparation for exams that I will then turn around and pay it forward and help teach people with, plus wine that I've been unable to drink for a long time because it's just everyday drinking wine that I've purchased. And my cellar is not a controlled temperature cellar. It's the coldest room in the house inside the bottom of a wardrobe. And some other wine stored at my in-laws' house, under their house. And it's just kept at an ambient temperature. It's full of all sorts of different things. Some champagne. We have what's called the 41. And it's a wine rack in a room that we need to drink these wines within the next 3 to 4 months. And 41 bottles fit in the rack. So are we going to have a 41 today, or are we going to have something from the cellar? So every time we pull out a 41, we put something else in its place. And that's our everyday drinking rack. One of your questions about how long will a wine last prompts me to mention poor wine, bad wine once it's open. If it smells of wet cardboard, if it smells like a mouse, or it smells musty and mouldy, it's probably off. And I would take that wine back to the purchasing point and say, it smells pretty odd to me. Is it what it's meant to smell like? And get them to replace it if it's not. And if you sort of drank half a bottle and then realised, top it up with water, put the cork back in, and then take it. Just to protect the contents. Okay.